Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, as John Campea likes to call me, your existential Mr. Rogers, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm here with issue 8 of the Weekly Hero. But you know what? It's not a show unless we have the heroine of heroines, the hero of my life.
Aw.
The
Empress of Effervescence.
The Empress
That's
of
what Glenn called
Effervescence.
me.
Chris Carr.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
You look lovely. Who are you today?
Thank
What
you.
are you today right
I'm
now?
a Charmander now.
Wow.
I'm a cute little fire starter Pokemon.
Well, I was going to say you look like a Pokemon.
Gen 1. The
Does
OG.
that mean, did Logan catch them all? And that's why?
Got the best one. He's actually has like a disgusting knowledge of Pokemon. He is so bad at knowing things. Pokemon, that's his thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you still married him?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. A nerd who makes me laugh. Come on.
I
And
don't
he's
judge.
cute. He's
I
real
don't know. He's
pretty.
a very handsome man.
Yeah. Do you see him as Riker?
I
Ooh,
did see him as Riker, and
Ooh.
apparently he does that Riker maneuver quite well.
He does.
That's good. It's always good to be Riker. And he's bearded Riker from season 2 on.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Exactly.
So that's good. Well, Chris, today is actually Halloween. You know, I'm dressed as a 17th century YouTube pundit. That's who I am today.
Perfect.
And you're a Pokemon.
Yeah.
So ain't we a pair?
We're just cute.
Well, you know, what is fun about doing the Weekly Hero is sometimes a new story drops right before we start to record this show.
Yeah.
And we have a big one today.
We got a juicy one.
We got a juicy one. They have cast Wonder Man. And I think it's actually a pretty great choice. Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
Yes.
Now, this is his third comic book character. Of course, he portrayed Black Manta in Aquaman.
And we'll continue to.
And the new Dr. Manhattan on the Watchmen TV series.
Good. He got an Emmy for that too, didn't he? Or at least a nomination.
I think he got a nomination.
Yeah.
And first of all, can we just talk about how impossibly handsome this man is?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I have to say, my initial impressions when I first heard this, I've thought of him as a Wonder Man in his life, and now he is truly a Wonder Man, playing the character of Wonder
what you
Man.
did there, nice.
A long time. I mean, I think Wonder Man goes all the way back to like Avengers 9 or something. Wonder Man, the character, was co-created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and a couple more people. And
Don Heck. Don Heck.
Don
was his
Heck, that's
artist,
right,
yeah,
Don
back
Heck.
in 1964.
64. And he has a relationship with Baron Zemo, which is interesting because they're only talking about bringing Trevor Slattery back, Ben Kingsley, for the show.
Yeah, and that's because of the actor angle, because Simon's an actor and stuntman, so it makes sense to have Trevor there too.
And if they lean in, are they going to bring Zemo back? I mean, Zemo helped get him his powers
Yeah.
to infiltrate and destroy the Avengers. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? First of all, how do you feel about this casting? What do you think about this news? What do you think about them making a Wonder Man show?
You know, I was honestly kind of surprised about the Wonder Man show because it's kind of a B-side for Marvel, right?
It is kind of a B-side.
But that's the genre, or that's the new territory we're treading into though, with these new phases and everything, right? We got to introduce everybody. We've had all the heavy hitters, and honestly, we started off with people who traditionally were more B-sides. You know?
Absolutely.
You know?
I mean, everyone's like, Iron Man's not an A-list character.
Yeah.
How'd that work out for you?
Exactly.
Quite well.
Now he is. But I think it'll be fun. He's such an interesting character, that stuntman actor. His father, Sanford Williams, is an industrialist, much like Tony Stark's father, Howard. But his business is being just run into the ground, and Stark is a much more lucrative operation.
I mean, they were mad at Stark without knowing that Tony Stark was Iron Man.
Yeah.
So that's part of the story. I think they're going to put all of this in there. I mean, and look, this is a character that goes all the way back to not quite, but almost the first year of Avengers comics, like you said, back in 64?
64, yeah.
I mean, this is a long and it's funny because when I was growing up, Wonder Man was a character I never could wrap my head around. He was kind of this ubiquitous. He was always with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I love this character because I don't equate him. He's had many storylines, and it's not fair to him. It's not fair to the character of Wonder Man.
For sure.
He didn't have his The Dark Knight Returns. There's no Wonder Man Returns.
there's
Even
not
though
a
there
Wonder
are,
Man
though,
year one.
they're kindest. But yeah, it's. I think it's cool though that they had to, as far as Avengers go. To me, Wonder Man is one of those key components to the Avengers because he's been there from the beginning, more so than a lot of Avengers that became Avengers later.
Yeah.
And so I think they had to introduce him. And I kind of like the fact they're going to introduce him in his own series. So a Disney Plus series, which is like with Moon Knight, you know, like with Agatha Harkness. I mean, they're going to start. Well, we've already seen Agatha in WandaVision, but still introduced in a series. I love the idea that they're going to give him his own show.
Do you think they are going to do the whole kind of kitchen sink approach to his powers, though? Because he does have everything. I mean, it's the superhuman strength, flight. I think at one point he had like an electromagnetic power as well. It's a lot.
I think they're going to have to more clear. Look at that. There he is. That's his initial
The
first
OG
appearance.
costume, yeah.
There you go with that big W. I do think that they're going to have to define his powers, only because that's what I mean. It is TV. Viewers like, wait, he could just do everything?
Yeah.
I think that might be getting a little. I don't know.
It gets a little convoluted.
Yes, if you're not a big OG comic fan, it's a little convoluted.
I think so too.
But I like this casting. I like what they're doing. I think you know, why not? It's cool that this is dropping news. I don't know when we're going to get. Obviously, it's going to be 2023 at some point. But I like this idea. And Dustin, the director of Shang-Chi, is developing this series.
Oh, awesome.
So I think that's a really great way to go. And I'm excited for this. I think, frankly, it's really good.
I think it'll be cool. Tonally, how do you think it's going to be? Because we've already had kind of the sitcom with She-Hulk. You know, we've dabbled with some.
You know, I mean, obviously,
procedurals.
because he is a stuntman and an actor. The idea of the Dream Factory, and suddenly he becomes. I think this is going to deal more with show business.
Yeah.
And what does it mean when you become a Wonder Man in a show or in a milieu where you want to become larger than life? I mean, if you're not an actor, becoming a superhero is the next best thing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I would think so.
I mean, he's going to bring that charisma to the actual character. I mean, I could see him maybe playing up the ego part of it. And once you become a superhero, how do you tamp an ego down when you're superpowered?
I'm hoping we get kind of a little bit of a boy sensibility with that of just, you know, being a hero, but it's that kind of hero for hire ideology and wanting the fame over the actual helping humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we had other news that, while not necessarily comic book related,
it's spooky.
It's spooky.
And 'tis the season.
Today is Halloween.
Yeah.
Now, one of my favorite people that I've met in the industry is producer Brian Fuller, writer-producer Brian Fuller. Brian cut his teeth working on Star Trek, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager. He was a producer on that. But one of the things that I love, one of my favorite things ever on TV, was his adaptation of Thomas Harris's novels, the Hannibal Lecter books.
Oh.
He did Hannibal. The 3 seasons of Hannibal, which I think
good.
One of the greatest, perhaps the greatest horror television series ever. Now, I've interviewed him a couple of times for my own YouTube channel, and he's a very smart guy. He had been talking to me years ago about wanting to do a Friday the 13th prequel series. Now, they were going to, he talked about what, he was like, how did Mrs. Voorhees become, she didn't just become someone who was a murderous, whacking camp counselors because something happened to her son. What happened even before that? Who's Jason Voorhees' father? And what kind of a relationship did they have? He was talking to me about this a long time ago. Well, today, and part of the reason that it couldn't happen was there was a rights issue with the writer of the original Victor Miller?
I believe so. Let me double check for you.
He's working on the show. He's one of the producers of the show.
Yeah, Victor Miller's producing along with copyright attorney Mark Toberoff and then Rob Barrismian.
Yeah.
Sorry if I said that wrong.
This was a long-standing. Victor Miller wanted to get the rights back because he, of course, created Mrs. Voorhees, and Jason Voorhees, as he appears with the hockey mask, didn't even show up till the 3rd film. So there was yes, he's wearing basically a sackcloth on his face with a eye hole torn into it in Friday the 13th Part 2. Okay. So there was a lot of rights issues to who owned the actual Friday the 13th characters. And finally, Victor Miller was able to liberate this because, of course, Friday the 13th came out in 1980. Yeah. So that the ending of that lawsuit, that whole rights issue, paved the way for this. So Brian Fuller is now going to be able to create this show. Now, I know you love horror films. You love slasher movies. You love anything to do with There She Is. There's Mrs. Voorhees. So, and it's coming from A24, Elevated Horror, The Legal Battle. It's really interesting. This looks like it's on Deadline. So this story, everyone should check it out because it's really interesting, the whole background. Now, what do you think about this? Could somebody convince you? Could we twist your arm to tune into this show?
I mean, my only knowledge of Friday the 13th is that at some point Jason goes to space.
He does.
And I know from Scream that Mrs. Voorhees was the original killer because Casey Drew Barrymore doesn't get that, right? And that's one of the things that leads to her demise. That's all I know. But I could maybe be convinced to watch this. Horror television shows typically are a little more palpable for me. One, because I can deal with the pacing of it. I can get up and leave for a moment. I can do all of that. And they're typically, not always because of streaming now, they're typically not as graphic usually. So I can usually deal with it. Hyper stylized violence, I don't know why, is just much easier for me. Really, really like realistic violence. Ooh, I know it's fake. I've been on sets. I've made SFX makeup before, and it's still just, creeps me out.
I used to work in special makeup effects, and I couldn't get enough.
Oh.
I actually got to once paint Dick Durock's Swamp Thing masks.
What?
I know, right?
That's
I've got a
rad.
picture of me somewhere on Instagram where I'm painting the...
How did you and Brian meet, by the way?
I met Brian Fuller through probably some writers' parties at mutual friends because a lot of the people that worked on Star Trek in terms of the writing staff, I knew them. And then I would see him around at events. When The Force Awakens came out, he and I both wound up standing in line at Toys R Us for the midnight opening of Force Friday so we could go get our toys.
That's awesome.
But he wanted the radio-controlled R2 that they didn't have, the really expensive one. I know. What are you going to do?
Poor Brian.
By the time we got into the store, half of it was all picked over anyway. I got a Lego First Order TIE Fighter. That's what I got that night. I know, right? So there you go, kids. But I'm really excited for him. I think that look, whatever he's going to bring, it's going to be effed up, psychologically interesting.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be a deep dive into the psychosis that created Mrs. Voorhees.
See, and that's more interesting to me, right? When it's just, hey, we're just killing co-eds or camp counselors or whatever you want to do. But if there's a rhyme and reason for the murdering, I can get on board with that. I'd like a psychological deep dive into darkness.
Oh, I have to say that a couple of years ago, Brian Fuller dressed up as Mrs. Voorhees. He threw a party, the ultimate Friday the 13th party at his house where you had to come dressed as characters from any of the films.
Oh.
And he dressed as Mrs. Voorhees. And if you look at him, he looked exactly like Mrs. Voorhees. I guess you could look up Brian Fuller, Mrs. Voorhees, Halloween party. It's amazing when he's holding up the knife.
Oh, Jesus. What is this image?
That is an altar
Well, he
of
misses
Mrs.
his mom.
Voorhees' head. That's Mrs. Voorhees.
It's kind of like how Helga Pataki made a shrine to Arnold on Hey Arnold. But, worse.
Wow.
That's a reference that is only for me.
Well, there you go. I mean, I think this is really exciting. Maybe it's not comic book related, although there have been Friday the 13th comics. I think it's very cool. And for Halloween, we get this news dropping today with somebody I know.
Yeah.
But so
Congrats,
congratulations, Brian Fuller. Absolutely.
So cool.
Now that brings us to, we wanted to talk about spooky comics, but I found out we have issues.
We have a big issue, mister.
But we have a real big issue that we learned about today while live on the John Campea show.
Yes.
And I don't think we could fight it out. But why don't you tell us what is it? What did I find out? I felt really ganged up on today.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
I was
ganged up
caught
on
between
for
a
your
rock and a
trash
hard
opinion?
place. Oh, my trash opinion.
Yeah. I say I love you so much. I love you.
Don't butter
I
me
do.
up.
I will. But your opinion's wrong. Willow is so great. Okay. This is also maybe one of those things like how you don't like Hook. Maybe it's just seeing at a specific age or something where like because I saw it as a kid, I'm just still filled with like childlike wonderment every time I see this movie. And Val Kilmer is so gosh dang gorgeous and fun and wonderful in this film.
Well, here's the thing.
How can you not like it? How can you not
Because
like Willow?
okay, as I was trying the point that I was making,
Okay.
the reason we part ways on this film is I thought during the 80s, fantasy filmmaking was kind of like Fetch in Clueless, right?
Okay.
They're trying to make Fetch happen.
You
Wasn't that
mean in
Clueless?
no, that's Mean Girls.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Why I say Clueless? Mean Girls. They're trying to make Fetch happen. They're trying to make fantasy happen. In 1981, we had Dragon Slayer. Hey, the greatest dragon ever seen on screen up until recently. The Vermithrax Pejorative. Movie was a bore. You know, Conan the Barbarian, which didn't have, I mean, yeah, it was the closest that anything came to being badass. That movie kicked ass, but that was more because it was more barbarian action. It was light on the fantasy. Sure, Thulsa Doom could turn into a giant snake, but it was realistic, and it was James Earl Jones, so it was Darth Vader turning into a snake, so it didn't matter. Everything else, you're the hunter from the future. There was just all kinds of, and all the fantasy, Ridley Scott's Legend, which I really like. I thought Legend was, but that was more of a fairy tale.
I didn't see Legend until 2020.
What?
Yeah.
Greatest makeup effects ever.
Oh,
Tim
it's so
Curry's
good.
Darkness.
Tim Curry's so good as Darkness.
Now, I was kind of excited for Willow, but the problem that I had was the character of Willow was kind of like, Hobbit much? I mean, it was such a derivation of all of Tolkien's themes without the wit or the intelligence or the meaning. It was just it was a distillation of fantasy tropes.
I'm having flashbacks to our Rings of Power after show with you.
I'm just saying. And look, I thought, admittedly, Joanne Whaley, who later became Joanne Whaley Kilmer, hot redhead. Can't go wrong with that. Mad Mardigan was great. Queen Bavmorda,
Yeah.
I mean, who looked like Snow White's queen, evil queen. I mean, this was just a collection of tropes, and it was just fantasy light. It was milquetoast fantasy. I never felt any danger in it. I will say this. They had one of the first great morphing effects that you saw in this film. So there was a lot of great visual effects, but I just felt this movie was, it was just pablum.
See, I just love it. And I feel like it is a homage and a love letter to all of those different tropes. And it was something that, and maybe this is the issue then, is that it was palpable for a kid to go, wow, this is a really great story. This is really, really fun and exciting. Someone who has to go off on a quest and do the right thing because no one else is going to help that baby. Just Willow. I love all the tropes mixed in there. I think it's wonderful. And that's all fairy tales are. Any retelling of these too, they all kind of mash together.
Look, man, I was in college by this point.
Okay.
I wanted something more. I'd seen Ralph Bakshi's half of the Lord of the Rings animated, which I liked, but I wanted to see, and we all wanted to see. Where's Lord of the Rings? That's what everybody asked. We wanted to see that.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like what we got with this, and this isn't a bad movie, but remember, also Willow gave us a two-headed dragon called an Eber-Sisk, named after Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. That is true, by the way.
That's a fun little
The
factoid.
Eber-Sisk. This movie just, I just felt it was not dangerous enough, not cool enough, and it was too much for little kids.
Oh man, Mad Mardigan was.
But I did like the music.
coolest. The music was great too. And to be fair, like I just hatched when this movie came out. Like that's when I just came up on the scene. So that might also be why I'm so in love with this. Is when my parents showed it to me when I was like 5 or 6.
Which I
loved it.
can understand. I mean, I can, because at 5 or 6 I can understand. But like you said, it's what time you see movies in your life.
Yeah,
But so we can agree to disagree. But I will say
for
this:
sure.
the Willow TV series, the trailer for the show. Now, see, there's the Eber-Sisk. Now that we have, and ILM's effects in this movie are great.
Yeah.
Now that we have, we've had Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Game of Thrones and many other things. Aragon, not so good. But we've had all kinds of World of Warcraft. There's been all kinds of fantasy movies that have been made. So now I think they know what they can do. They know they don't just have to direct fantasy toward children.
Yeah,
It's for everybody. I think that said, the new Willow show does look quite good.
it looks fun.
It really
It looks
looks.
super, super fun.
It looks like they've added layers to it. Warwick Davis has grown up into the role. I really like what he's been doing on his other TV roles too.
Yeah.
I think he's great. So I'm hoping fingers crossed that this Willow show is awesome.
I hope so. I really just want it to usher in new fantasy fans too. You know, I feel like it's a very accessible kind of version of fantasy. We're not doing, very highbrow like token speech patterns or things like that. I always like it when and this is just a very American perspective, I guess, but it's so nice when you can visualize yourself in a fantasy world, and that's hard to do sometimes just because of, like even Harry Potter or things like that. Well, it was, that's over in England. That makes it extra mystical and magical.
Oh, it does.
Right?
Because all fantasy stories all begin somewhere in the UK.
Yeah.
All of them.
Anytime you audition for a fantasy video game, basically, they're like, you better have some kind of UK dialect because that fantasy does not take place in America.
Do you have one?
I have a couple.
Can you say something?
Golly. I don't know. I need to read something.
I know. I'm putting you on the spot.
Willow is a 1988 American dark fantasy adventure film directed by Ron Howard and produced by Nigel Wood.
Wow, that was pretty great.
Thank you. I
love how you can just do that.
Logan's really good. My husband's a dialect coach, and so he can just bounce between all of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
But those aren't just the issues we want to talk about. It's Halloween.
It is.
And we got to talk about comics. And you've got a pretty good, you suggested let's bring in some horror-related comics.
Yeah.
What was your horror-related comic?
Well, I will tell you right after this break from our sponsors, the good folks over at Stamps.com.
We want to thank a sponsor of today's episode, Stamps.com. Guys, it happens every holiday season. No matter how prepared we think we are for the season, it always turns out we're nowhere near as prepared as we thought we were, especially with our shipping. And right about now, seasonal excitement, or dread as the case may be, is really starting to settle in, especially for small businesses. Slaying through traffic to the post office, inboxes more like a blizzard than a winter wonderland, rushing to send cards and gifts to your loyal clients. The good news is it's not too late to get your holiday mailing and shipping under control with Stamps.com. Sign up now and you'll be printing your own postage in minutes. Because Stamps.com is your one-stop shop for all of your shipping and mailing needs. Get access to the United States Postal Service and UPS services that you need to run your business right from your computer. Up to 86% off. So this holiday season, trade late nights for silent nights and get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code CAMPIA for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code CAMPIA.
And well, Chris, our friends at Stamps.com generously supported this issue of The Weekly Hero.
Thanks, Stamps.com.
But that doesn't change the fact that you have an issue.
I do. I have a great issue.
Do you?
I do. I think this is also kind of a left field pick for me because I'm not a horror person, right?
No.
But I grew up watching Invader Zim, and I loved that cartoon.
That's Jordan
Jonan Vasquez.
Jonan Vasquez.
And it was so great. I loved Gurr. I loved every time we learned about different alien organs. We'd be like, my squiggly smooch. Love that show so much. So great. So I had stumbled upon, probably in junior high, Jonan's comic, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which is not for kids.
No.
If you think that your kid who loves Invader Zim reruns should read this, you're wrong. Don't do it. It is so violent. It is so gory. I mean, the name, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. So Johnny, or C, he is a very, very moody fella. This takes place in the 90s. The run was from 95 to 97, I believe. And it talks about consumerism and, just 90s nostalgia and stuff like that. But there's also just this weird kid who is bothered by everything. I mean, humidity makes him want to be a murderer. People who smoke drive him into a homicidal rage. But also, he needs to keep painting his house. So he uses the blood of his victims to paint his house.
As one does.
As you know, when you need a red wall, there you go. The art in this is really, really fascinating too, right? It has that very Invader Zim jagged style that we associate with Vasquez. But what's really cool too is when we have speech bubbles, those change depending on their mood, right? So the more angry and homicidal Johnny gets, the speech bubbles become like kind of aggressive and jabby and stuff. Yeah. So you start to see them kind of shift out. It was just one of the first times I saw real detail to that kind of thing and emotion in a comic. Which is odd to say because it's just a very violent, weird, trippy thing of going, oh, wow, the nuance in this is really amazing. It's a great, great read. It's wildly, wildly graphic. It's all told through vignettes. You really don't know when the order of these stories are happening or anything, but it's some disturbing stuff. And if you want to read about some murders for Halloween, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac is my pick. Have you read this before, Rob?
Yeah, I have, but
Okay.
a long time ago, back when I was married, my ex-wife was a huge fan.
Oh.
A huge fan. I mean, Gurr.
is very
We had
cool
a
and
stuffed
confusing.
Gurr, like multiple stuffed Gurrs around the house. And Jonan Vasquez, we met him, I think at Comic-Con.
Oh, nice.
A big fan of Invader Zim, but this comic was definitely also popular.
Oh, yeah.
Back then.
Oh man, you can get the director's cut of this too. It's called the director's cut, and it's the omnibus of it.
Well, yeah, that's what I. When you told me about this, I looked into it because I really only collect like hardcover omnibuses
Yeah.
now, just because. But I think it is in a hardcover.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I will now have to get it.
Yeah. I will say too, for those of you who are digital readers, which again I don't understand for comics, the Kindle, you cannot read this comic on there. I mean, it's just the formatting and everything is just bleh.
Yeah, I
don't
don't
do it. Don't
I
spend your
can't-
money that way.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be prudent. My comic is a classic that goes all the way back to the early 70s. Marvel in the 70s was big on literary characters. They had licensed like John Carter, Warlord of Mars, they put out from the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, Conan the Barbarian. One of my favorite what ifs was what if Conan the Barbarian was in the 20th century.
Ooh.
But another literary character that they used, but I don't think they had to pay for the rights for it, was Dracula. And Tomb of Dracula, which started in the early 70s. This comic, what I loved about this was at the time when I was a kid, sometimes I was seeing Hammer horror. Hammer is a studio that made Dracula, Frankenstein. They had done what the Universal Monsters did, but in a much more updated. There were boobies in those movies.
Whoa.
And when sometimes I get to see them, I'm like, oh, But what I really liked about the Tomb of Dracula comic, and Marv Wolfman, who later went on to define Teen Titans, and there was a lot of great creators that worked on this comic, but this was truly a great horror comic. It leaned in to the horror of it all. It was not directed at kids.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, look at that. The child is a slayer of the man. I mean, this was a horrific comic that basically Dracula was the hero. And I love the art. It was very gothic, and you can see this comic sort of defined the early to mid 70s, and that was when I started reading comics as a kid. I didn't like horror comics much. I liked superhero comics, but I liked Tomb of Dracula and I liked Ghost Rider.
Oh.
And both of those comics leaned into the horror, more so to the horror elements. And it was just a great comic to read. The art was great. And it was at the same time I was reading like Famous Monsters magazine that Forrest Ackerman put out with all the horrible puns, but they would cover, all the monsters. And this comic ran for quite a while. They've collected it into hardcover omnibuses, which are great. And then, of course, Dracula continued to on as a character in Marvel Comics. There's even at one point he bit Storm. Dracula turned Storm in it. I think it's X-Men Annual 6 from 1982. Dracula turned Storm into, and the cover is great because it's got Vampire Bride Storm on the cover, drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz, who later went on to do Moon Knight and everything. So this is just a great classical gothic kick-ass horror comic that still to this day it really works. You can see the panel design here. The art's great. It's really moody. And as a kid, it's funny, when I got the omnibuses, I was like, are these comics going to be as kick-ass now as they were when I was a kid? And they really kind of are.
Oh, they live up?
Yeah, they live up. They
That's
live
awesome.
up. And the omnibuses are beautiful. I love the omnibuses.
Because I know it's a behemoth of a run. It's like 70 issues.
Yeah, there's two thick omnibuses.
Okay, cool.
So
with the different writers and everything too, because I know like Conway came in for a little bit and
Yeah.
everything. Does it feel like that's a smooth transition, or does it have?
you know what? There different writers did different things. There's sometimes there's more of a pulp feel to it.
Ooh, okay.
Where Dracula was turned into he was more heroic. I like like more of the horror elements into it. Like
Yeah.
it's Marv Wolfman was the writer I really liked the most writing, and Marv Wolfman went on to do, like, he created Brother Blood and Mother Mayhem. He had an affinity for horror
Yeah.
in a way that I really liked. So it's a great comic.
Man,
It's a great comic.
excellent issue.
So yeah, and for those of you who are interested, you should blind buy the omnibuses are expensive. Go to Cheap Graphic Novels. That's an actual place. They don't sponsor this show, but I get a lot of my omnibuses at Cheap Graphic Novels because they do a fantastic job packaging their books. Nothing will happen to your books, and you can get them cheap.
Ooh, there we
So
go.
cheaper than Amazon sometimes.
Nice. So if you want to stick to Marvel, you can read Tomb of Dracula. If you want to read about, a homicidal kid, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. These are good issues. I
think-
like them.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're good issues. You know what else is good?
What?
Hot Toys.
Yeah, they are. You
Hot
love
Toys. And I brought in, to celebrate the release of the Quantum Mania trailer, I brought in Hope Van Dyne.
them. Woo.
And of course, it was great when they made, Hot Toys doesn't do a lot of female figures, but when they do, they're usually pretty exquisite. This one in particular is one of my favorites. So we can take a look at that.
Hello everybody, I am here with the Titan of Twerking, the Sultan of Sugar Daddies, and the Relisher of Redheads.
Can't argue with any of those, Taylor.
Rob, what do you have for us today?
Today's Hot Toy segment, this is actually an actual hot toy. It is from Ant-Man and the Wasp. I figured with Quantum Mania, the trailer being released, I would show this figure. I really like this figure. This is Hope Van Dyne as the Wasp. This is actually a really fun figure. Not only is it great, I didn't put it in, I forgot to put the battery in. It has a light up feature in the mask, inside the helmet. It does light up. I really like the wing features on this figure. The costume is incredibly well done. Obviously, I have her flying on the base, the action base that Hot Toys provides. This figure is full of accessories, including the wings. And of course, it comes with the miniaturized version of the Wasp and also another head sculpt of Hope Van Dyne outside of the mask, which I think is, the likeness that you can see is quite good. And I think this is, Hot Toys doesn't do a lot of female figures. And when they do female figures, they're usually pretty spectacular. And I think this is one of the greatest female figures Hot Toys has ever done. It really is beautifully constructed. The costume, I said, is on point. The wing feature is really, really, really cleverly done. Little fragile, you gotta be careful with it because you don't want to break it. But the fact that you can display this figure in a number of different ways, I really enjoy this. I know obviously the way I have it displayed is a little obtrusive in terms of covering up the costume, but truly a really great figure. I know I'll probably have to buy another one when Quantum Mania comes out, but if you have in your display an Ant-Man from Ant-Man and the Wasp and this figure, it looks great in any display. I took this out of my Infinity War Endgame display, but I'm a huge fan of this particular figure, even though she is not a redhead. So I still love this figure anyway. I think it's a spectacular Hot Toys figure. A lot of fun, a lot of accessories, and it's a terrific top shelf offering from Hot Toys.
How can you not love Hope Van Dyne? I mean, it's funny. I never thought as a old middle-aged man with one foot in the grave that I would be excited about female action figures. But who knew?
Yay!
I still love them. And actually, if you pair her with Ant-Man, with Paul Rudd, it's a great display. I mean, in a way, it mirrors this Iron Man Pepper Potts display when she puts on the armor in Endgame.
Oh yeah.
They make that figure is actually it's actually called Rescue. That figure is called Rescue.
Yeah.
Because the armor, but it's kind of like putting them side by side on their flying posts. That you saw the Hot Toys flying post, which I really love. It's cool. So I had them in the case. I had the Mark 85 Iron Man and Rescue. They're kind of back to back fighting, and I had Ant-Man. I mean, they don't make a Giant Man because Hot Toys that would probably cost $10,000, but I had kind of Ant-Man and Hope displayed with them fighting on the battlefield.
Nice.
So a really great figure from Hot Toys, celebrating the upcoming release of Quantum Mania in February.
Oh, yeah.
So,
coming up on us.
There you go. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. And this has been another exciting episode. Can you believe we've done 8 of these?
I know. Why do they keep letting us do these? This is great.
It is great. It's a lot of fun.
John.
We just got to get, if you love this show, you got to you got to subscribe, tell your friends, hit the indicator or the bell.
Yeah. Turn that bell on so you get notified when these tasty episodes drop.
Yeah, because if you still want to see us and our issues,
you got to watch.
You got to watch. Tell your friends.
Smash that like button.
And do you have hot plans for Halloween tonight, or have you already gone to Halloween?
No, I've got 2 more things to do tonight. I'm going to stop by Amy Newman's party. So excited to see Amy. And then I'm going to go hand out candy with my friend Tanya and Scott. J. Scott Campbell, who created Danger Girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you would know him.
I love Danger Girl.
Yeah. She was very formative for Logan.
I can understand why.
Yeah. So we're going to do that, and we will be Troy and Riker again. Are you doing anything? Are you doing a costume change?
No, I'm unfortunately, I'm not unfortunately, I'm fortunately working on I guess I could call it a horror film. Yeah, I've got some editorial work to do on a project I can't really talk about yet.
That's exciting.
Almost done.
Nice. Well, and you also have to do the show tomorrow, so you probably aren't going to party.
No, I'm not going to tie one on. It's still, after all, Sober October, right?
Oh, I ended Sober October on Friday, and
too. Let's be honest.
It's been great.
That is good. Well, all right. Well, that brings us again, I guess, to the end.
Yeah, the end
of issue 8 of the Weekly Hero.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but who knows what's going to drop by then.
Exactly. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. We want to thank our sponsor, of course, Stamps.com. We want to thank all of you out there for supporting the John Campea Show and this channel and giving us great things to talk about and being generous. I mean, this show is not live, so you just have to listen to us and tell us how great we are.
Yeah.
In the comments below.
Oh, also, if you are already following me on Twitter, actor Chris Carr, you will find on there some information to go buy and download the game Thanksgiving Day. It came out today. Yeah.
And you and Logan do voices.
Logan and I are both voices in this. Sandy Johnson from the original Halloween movie is one of the characters as well. It's a real fun game about, homicidal turkeys.
Speaking of that, where can people find you?
At Actor Chris Carr on both Instagram and Twitter, or you can head over to my studio if you want to learn about voiceover, www.speakfriendstudio.com.
And I'm, of course, Robert Meyer Burnett. You can find me on Instagram at RMBurnett. Find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or find me at Post Geek Singularity on YouTube. And that brings us to the end of the Weekly Hero, issue 8. Collect them all, kids.
Yeah. Happy spooky season. Bye.